Right, so hello everybody. I am delighted and honoured to be joined from, by the looks of things, from hyperspace there by the wonderful Dr. David Toke. Where are you,
Yes,
David?
I'm trying to rescue the James Webb Telescope. They're threatened by Trump-inspired budget cuts, and I sort of rushed up in my spaceship, lots of no sheep, with my supplies of food, vegetarian, of course, for the people running the James Webb Telescope. But when I was almost there, somebody told me, said, "Look, there's nobody there. It's run by robots and software." So I'm still on the
You've
way
had a
back.
wasted journey.
Yes,
Well,
that's
I'm
right.
so
Yes.
glad that you could dial in from the James Webb Telescope for us today. But yeah, look,
Nearly, not quite.
I
Not
should
actually
introduce
there.
I should introduce David properly. So, David is a reader in energy politics. Is that correct? At Aberdeen
That's right.
University. But I know him really best as a sort of writer, thinker, blogger, all about energy. Kind of my go-to writer, thinker on Substack on energy issues. But yeah, I was looking back this morning. I think I first came across you and your work like probably early 2010s on Twitter, and you had a blog going way back to that sort of era as well. I think your original blog
Oh
before you
yes,
went to Substack.
I've been blogging all over the world. Yes.
Yeah. So, and also, I guess I should introduce myself as well because some of your subscribers may not be aware of me. I mean, it seems impossible to think anybody doesn't know
Yeah.
the famous film director Vicky Leslie. Yeah, I'm a documentary producer director, and David and I know each other through a shared interest in nuclear power because I somehow by accident ended up spending about 10 years, more than 10 years, making feature documentary about the social political history of nuclear energy called The Atom: A Love Affair. And I should plug that. You can see it on Netflix and even more weirdly on Disney Plus. But that's only in Europe. So if you're in America, well, drop me a line. I'll tell you. You can watch it, but not on Netflix currently in the States. Anyway, so yeah, that's me. And yeah, David and me have been talking. Well, text talking on the keyboard for a while about doing a kind of video with all these like great video audio tools on Substack. So he thought it would be fun to do something where we could actually like see each other's faces and the man behind the myth, the man behind the keyboard. So what we thought we'd do is talk a little bit about. So I know you had a whole life, didn't you, before you got into kind of academia and what you're doing now. So talk a bit about that, and then for those of you who are like super energy wonky, we will get into some stuff about 100% renewables, which is something Dave's really hot on, and also we probably will talk a bit about nuclear because that's kind of my bag, my interest, and a shared interest. So you were telling me that you could have been Dale Vince. Explain
Yes, that's right.
explain yourself. What happened?
Way back, way back in the early '90s. Sounds a bit like a cowboy movie there, doesn't it? This is 1990s. I decided that I wanted to get into the wind power development business and formed a company and went out and prospected and got together some proposals for wind power schemes. And in doing so, I was looking for wind power generation equipment. I went over to Germany and met the marvelous owner, founder of a firm called Einacom, Alois Wobben, who later became a multi-millionaire out of his wind turbines. I remember this must have been, I forget, probably 91, somewhere around there. And he said, look, you can have a discount if you put up one or two of our wind turbines. And he went on about how he was thinking about doing gearless wind turbines, stuff like that. It's very high tech, it seemed, in those days. And I went back and I passed over this opportunity. And the trouble is, I was working as a school teacher and I foolishly carried on doing that for a few years, still longer. But Dale Vince, of course, who, to be honest, knew more about the nuts and bolts of this stuff and had more of an incentive. Oh, I met a couple of times way back then. He seemed a jolly good sort of chap.
Wasn't he like a kind of bit of a
the drive and the
kind of guy,
initiative to take up Mr. Robin offers, and he went ahead, and the rest is
history. So you were a school teacher. So what were you teaching? That was your career before sort of that was your original career, right, as a school teacher?
I was a sort of, I wouldn't describe myself as a disastrous school teacher, but I don't think I was an okay sort of school teacher.
Primary school or secondary school?
No. I was teaching at a state grammar school, and I was teaching politics mainly at A level, but and mathematics as well, because I remember I'd lost my job as a journalist, and I ended up going into school teaching because I had a qualification into it, because I'd been to what was then Wolverhampton Polytechnic. I went there primarily because I thought I could become student union president, which I did, of course. I have another reason. Learning about teaching was secondary, but I ended up falling back into there. But I was much more interested in other things, really. That's my problem. Not sufficiently motivated. Teaching is a really great thing to do, and
it's very hard work, though, isn't it? All my friends are teachers
in my time, but I don't think I was one of them. Well, at least I didn't have the motivation. I think that was the biggest.
So this is interesting. So I had misunderstood. I thought you'd gone teaching to journalism to academia, but it was journalism then teaching then academia. So
yeah,
originally you were a journalist. So tell me about then. How did you? Was that straight out of college? You were a journalist? What, like a news?
Well, it was after being a student union president, and I was writing a what's on guide for a local free newspaper, and I was made full time, and I don't want to give the cut and thrust. You don't want to go into the cut and thrust of your employment history. So I don't want but there's a lot of cut and thrust, and I got a lot of the cut. And anyway, I decided not to bother going back into it. But it was all great fun, of course, and I was also a community journalist doing community newspapers and all that sort of stuff.
So you've always had that bug for writing, then, going way back?
Yes. I've always been into scribbling things. I sort of carried on writing things for higher brow newspapers. Used to get the odd article and things like the New Statesman and even the Times Higher Educational Eddy, the Guardian, stuff like that, you know. But I must say, these days I don't bother trying to get articles in papers like that, because
journalism has changed.
So much bother. I think, well, I'll write a blog post.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Substack is democratizing a lot of things, isn't it?
That's
how did you move from being a politics and maths teacher into what you're doing now? Then was that a kind of, something that was wanted, or where did that come from?
I mean, the maths was a bit of a distraction. I mean, it does help a little bit with doing the statistics, I suppose, and spreadsheets. All of my wife helps me with that. But when I went for an interview to do a PGCE, as you do, and I was down to apply to be a teacher in politics and history as a subsidiary, and the guy at the interview, he says, you've got a grade D at A-level maths. I says, yeah. So he crossed out the history and put maths, which really indicates how badly this country is off for maths teachers. And I ended up teaching maths a lot, which and again, I did sort of all right, but I didn't have the required motivation. You see, this is the problem. Anyway, we diverge. from.
Yeah, so you decided to, what did you do? You went off and did a master's, or you did you pick straight to a PhD, or how did you end up moving into the L&D
did a
policy?
master's degree whilst I was still a school teacher. I'm writing bits and bobs for newspapers and magazines on the side, and I wrote a book called Green Energy in 1990, which sold reasonably well. Actually, it's my most copies I've sold of any book.
Wow. So your
That
energy
might not. Oh
interest
yeah, well there we are.
predates that's a long stat. Well, yeah, you just mentioned about the wind energy. All your interest in green
It's a
energy.
brilliant book. Everybody should get it. You can get it for virtually nothing on Amazon these days.
Well, yeah,
Anyway.
I'll look it up. I shall link to it. I recently found, having a big clear out, I found my old Friends of the Earth and Blue Peter Green annuals from, I think, like 1989 and 1990 when I was like 12 or something. I was so I could have bought your book as a little teenager in 1990. I would have been probably very interested in it.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure you would. And after that, I decided to go into the wind power business and concluded that I was much better suited writing about it. I always thought this about the renewable energy business. It really requires a lot of knowledge, dedication, motivation, etc. And for me, I find it much easier to write about it.
Yeah. Well, they're both needed,
have.
aren't they? That you need. There's a very important role in explaining stuff and
well, it is. I mean, you need the right policies, regulations,
yeah.
incentives, and so on, and that comes from the sort of political pressure and getting everybody interested into doing that.
There's a big skill in that's a writing skill, presumably from over the decades, over the years, for the industry, the green energy industry, to I guess like make its case to the powers that be, to the governments that have got the who are in power to make those policy changes. You've got to be able to write that down and clearly explain explain to the governments why they should do this. So
it's part of the process, of course. Yeah. Doing it is very important because there you obviously
well, yeah, you make the case, yeah, you're doing it, yeah.
You more about the practicalities,
yeah,
and what is required to do it.
So what's your main like research or your academic area now these days? What are you focusing on mostly?
Well, the past 2.5 years been running a ESRC funded research project based at the University of Aberdeen, which is looking into what influences the outcomes of solar farm planning applications at a local authority level.
Oh, okay.
And we're busy sort of carrying on this research and writing stuff up into academic papers. So that's what I've been doing recently. But I suppose in a quasi-academic sense, I've also been researching 100% renewable energy as well.
Yeah.
Because done research in collaboration with some people based at Finnish University, Christian Brer et al. We did a big report on that, and there's been academic articles spun off that. So there's a bit of a crossover there. And of course, that was part of 100% Renewable UK Limited activities.
Mm-hmm.
We campaigned for getting solar panels mandatory on new homes as well. That's been part of the campaign for that, which may be successful depending on the government finally implementing the legislation on new houses, which is going to make heat pumps effectively mandatory as well as that. And so did a lot of campaigning for that. And I really started the Energy Revolutions blog, which I spend a lot of time doing these days, because I then did another public-oriented book. This is on top of all the academic books and papers which Pluto Press kindly decided to publish, called Energy Revolutions, Profiteering versus Democracy, available from us at a very small price. And, and they suggested, well, you should do a Substack blog. I sort of put it up there nominally for quite a long time ago without doing anything about it. But I thought, oh, well, I'll do something about this then. And so that's become more of a thing of itself.
So you got two parts of your writing then, haven't you? You've got the kind of academic policy, very, I guess, like wonky stuff you're doing, and then you're doing the more public facing stuff. Like, how do you see the balance between those? That they're both important, I guess, in different ways.
Both important, but both quite different. I think being involved in production of academic work is quite intensive and takes up a lot of your front cortical, whatever it is,
cortex,
headspace, and trying to do public-oriented stuff really can be a bit of a conflict for that, because it's rather different. I can understand why a lot of academics don't do.
That's really interesting. Do you mean it's different in terms of the mental, like, processing required? Yeah,
that's partly it. And partly it's a matter of time thinking about it. You just don't have the time, because in your professional capacity as an academic, you've got to produce research, or at least to gain advancement in so-called research-intensive universities you have, and preferably win research grants and so on. You've got to think about the theory, and less about public outreach. So you can see why you don't see quite so many academics out there making.
But you mentioned before, you've obviously got this kind of campaigning drive, and so the public facing stuff fits in with that, doesn't it? I suppose, about like explaining stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
persuading them. Yeah.
If you look at my profile, I've still got academic stuff coming through, but it's less than it was a few years ago, and I think that's a factor in that I'm interested.
And how are you finding? I know you mentioned before that you're getting so much more, I guess, like engagement and reading on your Substack than you did on your old blog. Like, what sort of interest and reception are you getting in these ideas on the? Are you finding people are interested in it?
I think there's about 10 times as many views I get these days on Substack for a blog post compared to if I put more or less the same thing on 100% Renewable UK, or the previous incarnation of a blog I used to do.
So there's an appetite, isn't there? I think there is a real appetite for people to learn, to know more about this stuff. I think it's become much. Would you say? I mean, I was thinking before we spoke, just like my own, I guess, kind of life and experience in this. I mean, obviously I mentioned way back as a young kind of teenager, I was interested in green stuff. In fact, Jonathan Porritt, when I first met him, I knew to me, Jonathan Porritt was like the green guy on Going Live, the Saturday morning kids TV show. And I eventually, as a grown up, I met Jonathan Porritt, and it was like I was meeting, a real celebrity off the telly. But I had that early interest, but I really got, I guess, like more.
I'll meet you up with him in a couple of weeks' time. We'll both
give him my love. I love Jonathan. But yeah, it's probably like that. I started doing Greenpeace campaigning in about 2004, I think, and then I started working on my film a few years after that, and just, reading and thinking a lot more about energy issues. And I really remember in those early years seeing this kind of, I think you called it a factoid, but like a sort of like received wisdom that renewables, not nice, but they could never make a big contribution. They could be 5-10% at most. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue them, but they could never really make a big contribution. And the change that's happened with renewables since then seems massive to me. Like, I mean, I was thinking about like my parents, they were always like teasing me, oh, you have to save the whale. They're not particularly interested in environmental issues at all. But my dad a few years ago was looking at getting solar panels on his bungalow. Like, it's just become a much more ordinary mainstream thing, it seems to me, as opposed to a kind of like weird greeny thing.
I think as a general rule, you've got to think two things. What's going to be a really good thing to do? And secondly, look into what's technically practical. And I remember reading it way back in 1987, when I was doing a master's degree, and I read something called the Brundtland Report, which people have forgotten now, but it's a big UN report. And they were talking about the potential for wind power. I thought, oh, that sounds good. Because, I mean, previously I hadn't thought much about it. I thought, yeah, that sounds quite practical. And I learned what was happening. There's actually quite a lot happening. And of course, a long time after then, solar PV came around, and until even 10 years ago, solar PV was very much the little brother or little sister of big, more adolescent, strapping wind power, and but that really has overtaken everything. And so through mass production, really.
Yeah.
And in
do you
China,
think that the
really
sort of policy like mindset in a way almost hasn't quite caught up with just how big that shift is? Like, you know, we can talk about nuclear a bit in a minute if we want to, but I mean, just that's been the area I've looked at, and what's been, you know, one of the things that I've really noticed. I first started. Tony Blair was still just prime minister when I first sort of started looking at this, and every, you know, new prime minister that's come in sort of seems to just say the same thing in regards to nuclear. Really, like it feels like the talking points have never really changed very much since like the mid 2000s. And yet the context around which that's coming is very different now. We, you know, solar is expanded.
Well, they feel
wind.
They feel that it's expected of them, and certainly a lot of people in the industry think that they've grown up and they think, well, nuclear is something of tremendous power, so therefore it's going to be a tremendously big energy source, and it's just a question of finding out why not. And
like clear the obstacles. Yeah. That seems to you sort of is a tremendous big thing as well, because that's another thing I wonder is, you know, and I wondered when I was making my film, I was always trying to sort of I guess like probe the psyche or something a little bit, but like why?
Well, a lot of it's about a
massive nuclear power station is a very different thing than just everyone in the country having some solar panels on their roof. They're a completely different sort of like conceptual way of powering the country, aren't they?
They are completely the opposites in that it's impossible to have, despite some of the amazing rubbish you see it on Twitter and so on. I still call it Twitter.
It's likewise.
And so it's impossible to have micro nuclear reactors. They're very highly engineered devices. Highly engineered devices are very expensive. And you couldn't even have a small steam generator that would cost anything like economic, that would be at all economic, that you need connected to these things, because the small steam generators are very expensive, because again, they're very highly engineered to very high standards, because they have to be. Same with nuclear power plants, so they have to be much larger, and they get larger and they get larger and get larger because of the economies of scale.
Yeah.
And that's the way the industry is. And large nuclear power stations cost what they do because they are very large construction projects requiring a lot of very specialized equipment and a lot of specialized people and a big industrialized base. And because all of these things cost an awful lot, particularly in the West, where the industrialized base has grown a lot smaller anyway. They cost a lot of money. Talking about going small is nonsense. It's going to the opposite
Also, I don't think they're
direction.
that small, right? When they say small, they're only about an SMR that they're talking about would mostly be about the same size as the original early power stations we had in like the 50s and 60s, I think. So I think maybe
Well,
when people hear
indeed,
small,
yes.
they
Yes.
imagine something that would fit in your garage or something, but we're not talking.
It's just an excuse.
It's
It's just an
smaller. It's a
excuse
lot
to get it.
smaller than Hinkley, but yeah. We know
It's just
this
an
is maybe an
excuse.
unfair question, really, but what's your sense? Like, it strikes me that the big expansion in solar and wind and things has almost happened like in spite of government policy. Having said that, I mean, I know we did have feed-in tariffs, and I think you had some
Well,
connection with those back in
there
the
have
day.
been a lot of
Yeah, but then we scrapped those. But like
there have been a lot of government policies supporting them.
yeah.
And
What's the is the direction of travel, do you think, just inevitably that renewables will just keep taking a bigger and bigger portion of the grid, and the grid will sort of have to adapt? That's what you hear, isn't it? In a way that you can't, this whole thing of like we must have base load and that the grid sort of can't cope. But is there just a sort of inexorable march of renewables, or do we still
well,
does it still
essentially,
require
yes.
like policy levers?
Essentially, yes. I mean, this government's renewable energy program will take us relatively close to their clean energy target, 95%. I didn't get quite that high, but it'll take up most of electricity. I mean, the problem is, as far as renewable energy expansion is concerned, is that there isn't enough electricity expansion, and that's down to a lot of industrial factors about this country's economy and the lack of economic development. I don't want to start, that's a whole different subject. And also but particularly the lack of electrification. That is, there's not enough electrification of the economy. That's what we really need for a variety of purposes, including, of course, decarbonisation.
Yeah.
I mean, electric vehicles are taking off.
That's another huge change, isn't it? I mean,
they're getting better and cheaper.
Have you seen that film, Who Killed the Electric Car? Do you know that film? There was a film probably about 20 years ago called Who Killed the Electric Car, which I think I can't remember if I did include it, but I did my like A to Z of my favourite documentary films, and I actually can't remember if I did put it on, but it was definitely one I thought about doing. And it was done like a sort of, here's the list, like a whodunit, here's the list of suspects. Was it big oil? There was some interesting stuff in there about the trolley companies in America in the early 1900s or whatever, who fought to get rid of cars. So the electric cars were being built like, I don't know, 100 years ago. But that film now feels like it's like a piece of history, because like the context in which that film came out in like 2002 or 3 or something, in terms of electric, like it doesn't make sense now.
You can't keep electric vehicles.
Yeah, they're just, everybody sees them. You see them out on the roads now, don't you? Yeah.
They're getting cheaper and cheaper.
But then we potentially hit a ceiling with that if we don't have enough. It's infrastructure, isn't it? We need to have the charging points and the.
Well, yes, but I think we're getting there in various ways. But
do you feel optimistic for the 100% renewables? Like, are we going to get there, do you think? Or are we going to get there? I'm sure we will get there eventually, but will we
in this country, you're going to get close to 100% renewable electricity. There's, there'd be a bit of nuclear with eventually Hinkley C gets built, maybe by 2035, and Sizewell C maybe by 2045 or something or other, assuming they go through with all this, carry on giving it £2 billion a year directly from the Treasury. But yes, I mean, by the way, I would say here that I really look forward to living to see the day that Sizewell C gets generating electricity, because it means I'm going to live a very long time.
Well, yeah, but I used to have my little joke with myself about that with my film, that I was in like a race with Hinkley, and it took me a very long time to make my film, but I did make it, and it exists now. It's out in the world, and Hinkley C has not yet generated any electricity, so I won that one. But what was I going to say? Yeah, so obviously, yeah, so there's electricity. That's, I suppose that's another thing. Do you find there's like a slippage, isn't there, when people talk about, electricity and energy? They're not the same thing. Electricity is a subset of energy.
No,
We have, all the, heating and transport and all these things.
we have to
I feel like we hear a
electrify
lot about
energy.
renewable electricity or nuclear electricity, but obviously there's a challenge then to convert, as you were saying, to electrifying more of the economy to be able to use
Yes,
that
but
for
if
those
you
other
do that,
things.
you end up energy consumption as a whole contracts as
Well,
far as
didn't
the
you just
figures are
publish
concerned.
I think I right in saying, maybe it wasn't, I read it recently with it about just how much less energy we have ended up using than the forecasted. That's
Oh
another
yeah,
thing. The demand for energy
yes,
was always forecasted, and now it's with AI, it's going to massively explode the demand, but actually it didn't explode in the way that.
well it hasn't, and
Yeah,
it's not going to. There's a substantial increase in electricity consumption because of AI going on in America. Even there, it's far less than what a lot of people are predicting. Elsewhere, it will add very little to electricity consumption. Um, we have more data centers, a small increase, but really, they should be much more concerned with trying to get more renewable energy to power other things. But the trouble is that, of course, even though most cars will be electrified, it takes cars last for about 18 years or something on average. So it's going to be a long time before
bit
you
of a
get through
lag.
the whole of
Yeah,
the fleet.
there's
And at
also.
the same time, electricity consumption has not been going up. If anything, going down. So you don't end up with a big increase in that way. We need to electrify other parts of the economy, particularly through heat pumps and
Yeah.
associated technology
And
to
we've got a
really.
potential sort of road bump coming up down the road in the shape of Nigel Farage and reform, and this this kind of like toxification of net zero, and like heat pumps suddenly seem to be being bandied around like they're just like a dirty word. Like, I mean, I know you're not a politics or the background in teaching politics, but like, where has this come from, do you think? And is it? My sense is that they're sort of out of step with the majority of people when we're in the UK. I know not everyone watching this will be, but I think most people are broadly supportive of renewable energy, of efforts to decarbonise. But you hear there's it's been a marked shift in the last sort of few years with the rise of reform, especially that sort of net zero is this kind of bogeyman that we have to resist. Like,
Well, they're trying to get particular niche interest groups onto their side. There's the oil and gas industry, but also there's people out in the sticks who don't like the look of wind farms and also solar farms, and so they're trying to pick up the votes of these people much more assuredly than other parties, and they don't worry so much about the fact that actually other people aren't so concerned about things, are much more interested in renewable energy because they just gamble on people being less interested in that than other subjects like the general economic situation, which
yeah.
I think is the biggest power behind the rise of reform. This idea that both Labour and Conservative have failed to move
Yeah,
the
people can
economy.
feel that the cost of living has gone up, and that that our services are less good.
Yes, and when you get that sort of situation, we've had this sort of situation for quite a number of years, and of course, leaving the EU has made it worse, of course, which which is ironic, in view of reform. And people react. I mean, this is classic. You look back throughout history, people start blaming minorities in particular, and suddenly immigration becomes a much bigger issue. Was anyway, and so we've got economy and immigration being the big issues, and reform are claiming to be competent on these issues. This is what a lot of it's about. It's not so much what people want It's what the public
What they
see
don't want, yeah.
people as being competent on. And unfortunately, both Labour and Conservative have been seen to be relatively incompetent on the biggest issues of the day. And they'll find out, of course, that if they do get in government, and this is still a long way to come, of course.
And I hate to
they're equally incompetent, and unless various other economic factors change, of course, which they might.
I mean, we can look across America. I know that they're not the same exactly, but they've got Donald Trump in power over there. I mean, I don't know how much you're like, obviously you're in the UK, but how much you're closely following like the energy policy over there. But how much damage potentially is his administration going to do to green energy in the States, or the kind of energy revolution?
Well,
or does it kind of carry on?
It'll reduce the relative increase in solar and wind, but it'll still carry on going up because it's the cheapest way of meeting new demand, which comes in the form of replacing old power stations, as well as meeting any increases in electricity demand, and building gas-fired power stations, which is the only other practical alternative, is very expensive. And anyway, I'll stop there.
Okay. Go on.
No, I'll carry on.
Okay. Well, we've covered lots of different things. We jumped around a bit, but maybe just to bring it back to your Substack again. Like, what are there any sort of favorite posts you think we should be directing people to, or kind of what are your sort of what your most popular things you've touched on? Where should we be telling people to look?
It varies in all sorts of strange ways, which I find it difficult to determine why. But so no, the most popular post at the moment, I've got the most new subscribers, it says on the dashboard, has been the thing about small modular reactors. But it changes, It was before then. It was me explaining why is electricity consumption not been increasing, and that's got a lot of views. I think generally, but the stuff I would like to write about more doesn't get so much interest out of people, like explaining how AI is not going to produce so much of a boom in increase in energy consumption for various reasons, and then the importance of energy efficiency. I mean,
energy efficiency I feel like it's almost like it's the Cinderella, isn't it? It doesn't get talked about nearly enough.
No.
Have such
when you start writing about it, people go, sort of,
it's not sexy, is it? Energy efficiency, but
quite remarkable. Quite stupid as well, because it's the unknown powerful force.
The one other thing, actually, talking about your writing that makes me think is how do you feel like the I guess like mainstream outlets are doing in their coverage of energy, newspapers or magazines or television? Do you obviously most people are not going to be reading energy policy articles on Substack. Like your man in the street, do you feel like they're getting a good idea of where we're at from what's out there in the main media?
Well, no, but I don't really blame the media, because the media shove out, I mean, this as a media person.
Yeah.
You work to get viewers.
Yeah.
So they work to get readers or whatever it is. So I mean, you can criticize opinion leaders, but they're people rather than the media. But I mean, the politicians, whether it be Kemi Badenoch or Richard Tice, they have their own reasons for attacking net zero, wanting to get rid of the climate change act and all that sort of stuff. They have their electoral logic, and I don't think it has the support of the the majority of the general public, but they do it for their own reasons. But it does have a dampening effect. I can see that on my own blog statistics. I mean, I'm still getting more subscribers, but perhaps less quickly than since first Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think there might be there's an element of like fashion as well, like things. I remember years ago. Do you remember? You don't hear about it so much now. We used to hear quite a bit about like the climate tipping point, as though there was like a tipping point, beyond which like we must take action before this tipping point, beyond which it becomes runaway climate change. That was the thing that was being talked about a lot. This is probably late 2000s. Anyway, I was at the TV company I was working at. We were developing or I was tasked with trying to develop a sort of like a reality show called Tipping Point Town, and there was going to be like a clock in the square of this town with it didn't really work on a number of levels because that's not actually how climate tipping points work. There's not just like a date. But anyway, we developed it and it didn't get anywhere. And then I don't know, a year or two later, we were talking about different ideas, and it came up again in conversation, and I raised it because I was the resident, save the whale guy or person in the office. And my boss said to me, "Oh no, climate change. That's like so 2009 or whatever year it was. It was like it was last year's news." And then it feels like like when Greta Thunberg, when she was in the news a lot, and there's the school strikes for climate and things, like it feels like it comes around and it's in the news for a bit and then it goes away again. And I suppose if you
that sort of thing. I mean, you have policy cycles.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the left and the liberals are fairly consistent in support of the green energy agenda and want to put climate action.
Well, and to be fair, actually, even the Tories it was Theresa May, I think, that was really pushing.
Well, yes, but they ebb and flow.
Yeah, they ebb
and
wind
flow.
blows.
I remember just before the 2010 general election, David Cameron was waxing quite heavily about green issues.
Oh yeah, and then it was like cut the green crap or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
This lasted a few years, and then particularly when they didn't have to please the Liberal Democrats anymore after 2015, it was. What did you say? Cut that was the phrase that came out of their press briefing. Cut the green crap.
Well, we're always in it.
When he was doing the debates, and then it came back again.
Yeah.
And as you say, Theresa May, net zero 2019, and Boris Johnson, who was, I assume, still is quite keen. Maybe he's being prodded by his wife. I don't know. On the subject, but now. It's gone down. It'll come back again.
Yeah.
Of course it will.
Yeah.
But we've got to go through the trough, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we've still got a government in power that is keen on making it a priority. I mean, I don't agree with everything it does, obviously, but
yeah,
I think Ed Miliband is doing a good job in many respects.
And he's a lot of merry-go-rounds, don't you, in politics, but he is actually, he's compared to some of the other ministers, he has been in that job. He was in that job in that brief previously, and he's back in that department again. Like, you sort of feel like often. I remember when I was looking at a certain point about trying to interview a nuclear minister for my film, and in hindsight, I'm really pleased that I didn't, because whichever one I had have picked, by the time the film came out, they would have been the sort of 7th, 8th, 9th ago minister. Like, they kind of cycle around so quickly. And the same in all the departments. But so it's, and I think I read that in the most recent reshuffle, Miliband sort of fought to stay in his department, because I think he does actually sort of know the brief quite well, and he cares about it. It seems to be the impression, which is great, and we want, we hope that continues, and it doesn't sort of protect it from the political winds a bit. But anyway, we've talked for quite a while now, haven't we? So is there anything else we should, any other? I'm sure there are stories we should cover. It's so nice. It's very nice to obviously we're all like enjoying the writing, but it's quite nice to just chat as well, isn't it, sometimes? Oh yes, fantastic. Yes. Maybe well, I don't know, but we'll send this out, but I wonder whether at some point anybody would be interested, we could do a Q&A if any of your subscribers want to I mean, I've just, this is just me throwing this out here right now, but you know, if people are interested in picking your brains and your expertise,
That'd be a good one. Yes,
yeah, we
yes,
could do
yes.
something like that. Do it as a live thing, get people on the Zoom to ask you some questions, because we've got this great resource there in your noggin.
Yes, yes. Great,
Wonderful. All
great.
right. Well, we'll wrap it up, and
Can
I will.
I put this on my blog? Can you send me a
Yeah, we'll
copy?
cross
I can put
post
it on
it, and
my
we'll
blog.
put. We were talking before about other Substackers that we might want to recommend, so we can put some links on to other people that we think you should check out.
Yes, indeed.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave.